Welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're tackling one of those cases, that just sticks with you.
Yeah, tough one.
The Green River Killer. Gary Ridgway. The name, the place it all happened, just sends chills down your spine.
I mean, it's not just a name, right? It's the sheer scale of it. Deadliest serial killer in U.S. history, as far as we know. 49 confirmed murders, but...
Could be so many more.
Exactly. And think about it. This went on for, 2 decades, 1982 to 2001, before DNA really took off as an investigative tool. How do you even wrap your head around that, someone operating like that for so long?
That's what we're here to unpack. We got to try. So for this deep dive, we've got a stack of sources trying to piece this whole thing together. We've got Wikipedia for the basics, EBSCO research starters for a more academic take, the biography.com timeline, always helps to see it laid out like that, and of course the 10-Minute Murder podcast did a really solid deep dive that filled in some gaps.
Lots to dig into.
Yeah. And the core question for us is, how? How did this happen? How did he manage to kill so many for so long, and what finally brought him down?
Right. I mean, every serial killer case is complex, but this one, the duration, the sheer number, it's a whole other level.
It really is. And to try and make sense of it, we have to start somewhere. Seems logical to begin with Ridgway himself. Who was he before he became the monster everyone knows him as?
Childhood. Always a good place to start, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't excuse anything, but it can give you some context.
Yeah.
Clues, maybe.
So Ridgway, he was born in Salt Lake City, Utah, in 1949. Not exactly the picture-perfect upbringing.
Understatement.
His mother, by many accounts, she was really domineering. Like, she'd humiliate him for bedwetting, even as a teenager.
Imagine the psychological impact of that, carrying that kind of shame and anger.
And it gets more complicated. He later admitted to having these really messed up feelings towards her. Anger, yeah, but also sexual attraction, even fantasized about killing her.
That's a lot to unpack there. A really disturbing mix of emotions, a lot of unresolved issues with his mother, clearly. And how does that then play out later in life?
And the father. Not much better. Bus driver, pretty strict. Apparently he constantly complained about sex workers, which, knowing what we know now about Ridgway...
Chilling foreshadowing, right?
Yeah.
The seeds of something were already there.
Yeah. And reportedly, there was physical punishment, too. Like, his mom would hit him for minor things.
So violence was a part of his life from a very early age, both experiencing it and witnessing it.
You can't help but wonder how that shapes a person. And on top of all that, school was a struggle for him. He had dyslexia, low IQ. They held him back in high school. Not an easy time.
So you've got this kid struggling at home, struggling in school, carrying a lot of baggage. And then...
This is where it gets scary. At 16, he stabbed a 6-year-old boy.
16? I mean, that's a huge red flag. It shows you the capacity for violence was already there.
The boy survived, thankfully. But think about it. This is decades before the Green River killings.
A missed warning sign, maybe? A pattern starting to emerge, that aggression, the targeting of someone vulnerable.
It's terrifying to think about. After that, he joined the Navy, served in Vietnam.
And this is where things seem to solidify, right? His fixation.
Yeah, reports are he had a lot of encounters with sex workers in Vietnam, even contracted gonorrhea. But it didn't stop him.
The risky behavior, the continued seeking out of those encounters, even after getting an STD. It points to a compulsion, a lack of control maybe, and maybe some anger too.
Right. Like, this pattern with sex workers, it started early and it just intensified. It becomes a central disturbing theme in his life and obviously in the case.
And his relationships with women, his marriages.
A mess. 3 marriages, all ending in divorce. His second wife even accused him of choking her.
So violence against women isn't limited to sex workers for him. It's a broader pattern of control, maybe even enjoying that power over them.
And here's where it gets weird. During that second marriage, he became super religious, like door-to-door preaching, Bible study all the time. But he's still seeing sex workers, still has these twisted desires. Like, he'd want to have sex in public, even in places where some of his victims were later found. How do you reconcile that?
Right. The devout Christian on one hand, the serial killer on the other. It's almost like he was trying to balance them out somehow.
A lot of internal conflict, for sure. Maybe even trying to suppress those urges with religion, but it obviously didn't work.
His exes, girlfriends, they all talk about his huge sexual appetite. Multiple times a day, wanting to do it in public, in the woods. And he himself, he talked about his obsession with sex workers, called it a love-hate relationship.
The classic dehumanization, right? He hates them, yet he needs them. They're objects to him, not people.
He'd complain about them being in his neighborhood, but then he'd go and use their services. In court, he even said he hated prostitutes and didn't want to pay them. It's also twisted.
It's about power, control. He doesn't see them as deserving respect, let alone payment. Just things to be used and discarded.
Which leads us to the murders themselves. It's tough to even talk about, but we have to. The scale of it is hard to grasp.
Officially, the confirmed murders span from 1982 to 1998, but there's a good chance it went on even longer, maybe as late as 2001.
And the number of victims.
At least 71 teenage girls and women.
Huh.
He admitted to so many, but even he said he lost count at some point. He gave different numbers, 65, then 71. Just imagine the sheer horror of not even remembering how many lives you've taken.
It's almost beyond comprehension. And it tells you something about how he viewed his victims, not as individuals, but as interchangeable.
He targeted the most vulnerable. Sex workers, runaways, mostly picked up along Pacific Highway South, a known spot for that kind of activity.
So he knew where to find them, knew they were less likely to be reported missing. And if they were, well,
their lives wouldn't matter as much. To him, at least.
To society, too, often. That's part of what made them so vulnerable.
It's heartbreaking. And sometimes he'd try to gain their trust, showing them a picture of his son.
Classic manipulation tactic. Makes him seem more human, relatable, family man, anything to lower their guard.
It makes you sick to think about. The way he killed them, it was almost always the same. Strangulation, sometimes with his bare hands, sometimes with ligatures.
That need for control, the power over life and death, literally in his hands, it's chilling.
He'd kill them in his home, his truck, secluded areas. Then he'd dump their bodies in these really remote wooded areas, a lot of them around the Green River, hence the name. Also near the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, other dump sites.
He knew the area well, knew where to hide things where they might not be found for a long time, if ever.
And this is messed up, but some victims were found in Oregon. He was transporting bodies across state lines.
Trying to throw off the investigation, make it harder to connect the dots. And then there's the necrophilia. He admitted to going back to the bodies, having sex with them.
He actually said he did it to reduce his need to kill living victims, like it was some kind of solution.
Twisted logic. Shows you how warped his thinking was. He completely dehumanized his victims, even in death.
And to make things even harder for the police, he'd contaminate the dump sites with stuff that wasn't his. Gum, cigarettes, even written materials. Anything to mislead them.
He was trying to be smart, playing games with the investigators, and for a long time, it worked.
The early discoveries in 1982, they were clustered together. Wendy Lee Caulfield, Giselle Ann Lavorne, Deborah Lynn Bonner, Marcia Faye Chapman, Cynthia Jean Hines, Opal Charmaine Mills, all found near the Green River. That's when the Green River Task Force was formed.
They knew they had a serious problem on their hands. But at that time, they were working with limited resources, no DNA testing like we have now. It was a huge uphill battle.
It's crazy, though, because he was actually a suspect early on. In 1983, someone saw Marie Malvar getting into his truck. There were other tips about him, too.
He was on their radar. But he passed a polygraph test in 1984.
How is that even possible?
Polygraphs aren't foolproof, especially with someone like Ridgway, who's clearly very good at deception and compartmentalizing.
So they had their suspicions, but not enough to hold him, and he just kept killing.
It must have been incredibly frustrating for investigators, knowing they had a possible lead, but not being able to nail it down.
They even consulted with Ted Bundy, of all people, another notorious serial killer. What was that about?
Desperate times, desperate measures. Bundy actually gave them some useful insights. He suggested that the killer might be revisiting the dump sites to relive the experience,
Which turned out to be true with Ridgway.
Bundy understood that dark side of the human psyche. He also told him to stake out fresh graves, figure the killer might come back.
Creepy, but makes sense in a twisted way. And then there was John E. Douglas, the FBI profiler. He developed a profile of the Green River Killer.
That would have been crucial in helping investigators narrow down the possibilities, looking at patterns, behaviors, potential motivations.
It wasn't until 1987 that they finally got a DNA sample from Ridgway, hair and saliva, but the technology back then
wasn't there yet. They could collect the evidence, but they couldn't do much with it.
Talk about frustrating. But they held on to it, and thank goodness they did, because
DNA testing advanced. In the late 90s, early 2000s, it became so much more powerful, more precise.
And in March 2001, boom, DNA linked Ridgway to 3 of the murders.
Game changer. Finally, they had hard evidence. Irrefutable.
They arrested him on November 30, 2001, right outside the Kenworth truck factory where he worked.
Imagine that. All those years living a double life, going to work, blending in while committing these horrific crimes.
And to think, he almost got away with it.
He probably thought he had, but technology caught up with him in the end.
So what happened then? Did he go to trial?
There was a plea bargain. Big news at the time. It came out in August 2003.
What was the deal?
Basically, he agreed to confess to everything and help locate the remains of his victims. In exchange, they wouldn't seek the death penalty.
Wow. I mean, it's understandable. The families wanted closure, wanted to find their loved ones.
When getting those confessions, finding those bodies, it was a huge victory for the investigation, even if it meant he wouldn't face execution.
So he confessed to 48 murders in King County and transporting 2 bodies to Oregon. What did he say about why he targeted prostitutes?
His answer was chilling, but not surprising. He said they were easy to pick up, less likely to be missed, that he hated them and didn't want to pay for sex.
Classic dehumanization. He didn't see them as human beings.
No, they were just objects to him, things to satisfy his urges, then dispose of.
He was sentenced on December 18, 2003. 48 consecutive life sentences, no parole. Plus, more time for tampering with evidence.
Basically, he was going to die in prison, no chance of ever getting out.
And as part of the plea deal, he started leading investigators to the bodies.
3 bodies were found in 2003, thanks to him. Then in 2005, they found Tracy Winston's skull, and that led to even more remains being discovered.
It's amazing and horrifying how many women he'd managed to hide.
And it wasn't over yet. In 2011, he pleaded guilty to another murder, Rebecca Marrero, even though he'd already confessed to it in the original plea bargain.
So in the end, 49 confirmed murders, more than any other serial killer in U.S. history.
And there might be more out there. We still don't know for sure.
Even after he was locked up, he kept revealing things, like he'd have sex with the victims before killing them. And he said he started burying them later on to try and stop himself from going back to the bodies.
Disturbing. Like he was trying to control his impulses, but it was too late. The damage was done.
And the identification of victims is still ongoing. Just recently, in December 2023, they identified Lori Ann Razpotnik. She was known as Bones 17. Her remains were found back in 1985.
Incredible. The power of DNA technology and the dedication of those investigators to keep working these cases, even decades later.
And in January 2024, they identified Tammy Charlene Lyles. She was Jane Doe B20. Her remains were found in 2003, along with others from 1985.
It brings some closure to the families, but you can't imagine the pain they've gone through, all those years of not knowing.
And it's not over yet. He was transferred back to King County Jail in September 2024.
Right. And the reason, according to the unsealed transport order, was to try and locate more remains.
He might still have information that could lead them to other victims.
It's a glimmer of hope for those families who are still waiting for answers.
Looking at the list of victims, it's just devastating. So many young women, their lives cut short. We can't list them all here, but just to give you an idea, there's Wendy Caulfield, 16 years old when she disappeared. Debra Bonner, 23. Opal Mills, 16. Marcy Chapman, 31.
Each name a tragedy. A daughter, a sister, a friend, gone. And so many more we may never know.
The impact of this case, it goes far beyond the victims themselves. It changed law enforcement, changed society.
Absolutely. The use of DNA technology in investigations, it really took off after this case. The need for better communication between agencies sharing information, that became clear too.
And it shined a light on the vulnerability of sex workers, a group that's often marginalized, ignored.
They're at such high risk, and their disappearances often don't get the attention they deserve. This case forced people to see that.
There have been so many documentaries, movies, books, even songs about the Green River Killer.
It's a story that captivates people, unfortunately. The darkness, the mystery, the sheer horror of it. But it also makes you think about how we treat each other, how we protect the vulnerable.
So what can we take away from all this? What have we learned?
We've learned that evil exists, that people like Ridgway are out there, but we've also learned that we can fight back. With science, with dedication, with compassion for the victims.
It's a tough case to wrap your head around, the scale of it, the brutality. But it's important to remember, to learn from it.
Right, to honor the victims, to try and prevent something like this from happening again.
So, to recap, we've looked at the terrible crimes of Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. We've seen the challenges investigators faced, the breakthroughs that led to his capture, and the lasting impact of this case.
We've seen the pain of the victims' families, the incredible work of law enforcement, the power of DNA technology.
And it makes you wonder, what can we do to prevent such horrors in the future? How can we protect the vulnerable support the families, and ensure that justice is served.
It's a question worth pondering. It's a responsibility we all share.
Thanks for joining us on this difficult but necessary deep dive.